I'm George Goldberger, founder and chief executive officer at Cell One Partners. We're an advisory firm into the industry, and I know many of you over the years of our work. So we'll have a very unique set of presentations today. Saudi Arabia Vision 2030 is what this is all about. An integral part of that vision, as identified by the king, is to establish Saudi Arabia as a global factor in our industry. So I respectfully ask you to listen carefully and afterwards ask questions, because we're as intrigued as perhaps you all are, and we want to know what is on your mind. The goal of the country, and it's only 5 years out, is to become a major factor in cell and gene therapy. There are things that are being done already. There's treatments, but this is looking to scale up substantially to a higher level. I should say, as an indication of that, Facilitate will have a conference in the spring of next year in Riyadh, in the capital city. So we have 3 presentations, and I'd like to invite the first presenter up here. And these are all leaders in the industry, and they'll introduce themselves, and we'll go through some slides, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And my name is Ahmed Alaskar. I'm the Executive Director of King Abdullah International Medical Research Center. I'm a consultant hematologist, stem cell transplanter, and a professor at King Syed bin Abdulaziz University in Riyadh. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and again, thank you for showing interest and attending this, again, unique session to share with you some of the plans and setup in Saudi Arabia in the field of biotechnology in general. I would like to, again, thank George again for moderating this and introducing the topic, and thanks to Facilitate again for giving us the opportunity to be here and to share with you this information. And again, looking forward to see you in Riyadh in the near future. So to start with, let me see. All right. For those who do not know much about Saudi Arabia, I thought to just give you an idea. Saudi Arabia is the 13th largest country, and with a population of more than 36 million and expected to be 60 million by 2030. So that, having said this, that there's an increased demand of healthcare and biotech products. The Vision 2030 of Saudi Arabia was launched in 2019 with the objective themes to have a vibrant society, a thriving economy, an ambitious nation, and multiple realization programs have been launched already and existing now in Saudi Arabia, whether in the financial sector with transformation, in the physical sustainability programs, human capability development, national industrial development and logistics, national transformation with the digitalization of the government and improving efficiency of the operation of the government, public investment program, fund program, and health sector transformation, just to say, to name some of them. And early last year, our Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, launched a specific and focused strategy on biotechnology development, aiming to develop vaccines from end-to-end genomics and expanding on genomic database and integrating genomics in healthcare, biomanufacturing, localization, and plant optimization to enhance food self-sufficiency and agricultural productivity. So the National Biotech Strategy aims to establish Saudi Arabia as a leading biotech hub in the Middle East and Africa by 2030, and establish the country as a leading biotech hub by 2040, and contribute over 34 billion to the non-oil GDP by 2040. Also aim to create 11,000 jobs. These are innovative jobs in the biotechnology sector by 2030. So over the next 5 to 10 years, the biotechnology market in Saudi Arabia is expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 14%, reaching an estimate of revenue of 12 billion by 2030. This is fueled by government support that will include a robust regulatory framework led by the Saudi FDA, technological enhancements, that's integration of the artificial intelligence and genomics into healthcare, demographic changes as the population will grow, the healthcare services demand will increase, and will be fueled by partnership and with international pharma and biotech companies. So this slide is busy. However, just to give you highlights of how the ecosystem is evolving in Saudi Arabia, there are multiple entities. Some of them are old and some of them are new, like the Research Development Innovation Authority, the Saudi NIH, the National Biotechnology Committee, which is led by the Crown Prince, Riyadh Biocentral, Oxagon of Neom. All of these are new entities added to the system, again, to enhance the biotech industry. To achieve this vision, a number of incentives and initiatives has been put forward. Energy and utility enablement in the industrial city, export credit financing, tax credits and exemptions, SME ecosystem stimulus, financial incentives, attractive land solutions, where there are dedicated land and industrial cities already in place, employment support programs with a number of training programs and to improve the talents and loan programs as well. So multiple partnership already in place and has been in effect with major pharma industry already and local industry in Saudi Arabia, aiming to multiple therapeutic areas like immunosuppressant, anti-diabetics, vaccines, cell and gene, and various products. So the expected market analysis for gene therapy in the Middle East and Africa is expected to grow at 17% annual compound annual growth rate, with Saudi Arabia constituting 1/3 of this market. So it's expected or anticipated to hit $1 billion by 2030 in the region. The same thing with the cell therapy and with the vaccines as well. So just to share with you a few slides, an overview about my institution, which is KAIMRC, and how it's contributing to the Vision 2030 and as one of the components, and there are multiple centers as such. So this is KAIMRC is the R&D arm of National Guard Health Affairs in Saudi Arabia, and it has multiple sites in Saudi Arabia, again to enable the benefits of R&D programs to reach the Saudi population. Number of core projects and facilities, infrastructure in the center, like the Saudi Biobank, which is ISO accredited, the Cord Blood Bank, which is FACT accredited, the Saudi Stem Cell Donor Registry, and the IPSC Bank, also international accredited, GMP facilities, BSL-3 labs, and Biotech Park. Animal research, multi-omics labs, biocovalence center, AI and bioinformatics, drug discovery program, cell and gene therapy, vaccine development, and clinical trials, including phase 1 clinical trial. So the clinical trial has been also a focus in the country, and it gained one of the support of the initiative. And we have established the Saudi Clinical Trial Enterprise, which is a network of the stakeholders, healthcare facilities, and pharma industry, again, to enhance the capabilities and the setup of clinical trials and the recruitment of patients in Saudi Arabia. And this is my last slide, which is again to share with you and to get your attention to the Riyadh, the Global Biotech Summit, which is being held annually, and again for networking and for exhibition of biotech products. And there is entrepreneur pitching and investors and public-private partnership signing that takes place during this event. So I would like to again stay tuned and hopefully to see you in Riyadh the next year. So with that, I would like to conclude and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, George. I'm Syed Ahmed. I'm a hematologist as well, and I'm the director of the CAR T-cell program at the King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Center in Riyadh. And again, thank you to facilitate, and thank you all for coming. So following on from Professor Ahmed Alaskar's talk, so this is really why we're here, isn't it? It's in the end of this journey, there are patients who we hope will benefit from what we do. So what I wanted to touch on is the clinical landscape of cell and gene therapy in the kingdom. So if we talk about the unmet need, it's, I guess, we have our cancers and harnessing cell and gene therapy to treat cancers. And we're seeing the sorts of revolutions that we have been in the last few years. And then we have these monogenic inherited disorders, metabolic disorders, where we're seeing how gene therapy is revolutionizing that as well. So if we start with genetic disorders, now this was actually a news item in one of the Arab newspapers. Arabs bear the brunt of gene disorders. So, and it says Arabs suffer from one of the highest rates of genetic diseases in the world. And so why is that? So in the Middle East and in many parts of North Africa, Asia, consanguinity exists and it's quite prevalent. It's a cultural norm that's changing, but it's still quite prevalent. So consanguinity is a factor, and large family sizes. So if you put those two together, you come up with sort of the family trees of one of my families that I look after, with, for example, with Fanconi anemia. So as you can see, there is somebody who's, you've got about 13 children over there, and then the next generation down, they've got a similar number, and there's two spouses. So you don't have a family with one or two kids affected. You have an entire clan affected with these genetic disorders, and you have certain founder mutations. So if you have consanguinity, large family sizes, then you have a lot of patients. So on the 8th floor of our tower, we have over 100 patients. We've stopped counting now with Fanconi anemia, for example, who've come through there and we know what some of our founder mutations are. So that's another reason why genetics is so important and dear to our heart. And then you have the genetic distribution of certain diseases to add to that. So you have consanguinity, you have large family sizes, and then you have certain distribution of diseases, say, for example, like sickle cell anemia. So if you look at that heat map, that was from Peel and Williams from the UK some years ago, that's a heat map of where you have sickle cell disease as a disease in homozygous state. So for example, if this works, so there's Saudi Arabia over there. And as you can see, there's a red around the Gulf over there on the eastern part of Saudi Arabia and the southwest. So those are the main pockets. So many of our patients from sickle cell come from there. And So if you think about prevalence and where, as Professor Alaskar said, where there is the ability to be able to treat these patients with innovative therapies. So that overlap area comes sort of in the GCC. Obviously, you have large numbers of patients in India as well. So transplantation for sickle cell disease, if you want to go somewhere where there's a lot of transplants for sickle cell disease, you'd come to these areas. So sickle cell disease, beta thalassemia, also prevalent over there, and for example, hemophilia, for the same reasons. Consanguinity, large family sizes. So in Saudi Arabia, about 4% of the population carry the trait, and 0.26% have sickle cell disease, with up to 10% of patients affected in certain pockets. So the estimate is between 80 to 100,000 patients. So in terms of genetic disorders, this was excellent work done by an outstanding clinician scientist, Dr. Faisal Al-Qurayya. By all means, please look him up. Many years ago, they set up the Saudi Genome Project, and we were doing large-scale whole exome sequencing for patients. So in one study of over 2,000 patients, they had 74 disease-related genes that they were able to uncover, and the potential confirmation of 21 previously reported candidate genes. And the other thing is the phenotype is different. So diseases that we thought were autosomal recessive are expressing themselves in the heterozygous state, or patients who are homozygous have a very mild phenotype. So you have not only do you have these novel mutations, founded mutations, but they behave differently as well. So we're able to contribute to the science and the understanding of these diseases. So these are some of the common genetic disorders that we come across. So sickle cell anemia, as we mentioned, thalassemia, intellectual disability, congenital glaucoma, Bardet-Biedl syndrome, and some of the other syndromes, for example, lysosomal storage disorders and the organic acidemias, very common in our institution. So, some of the visitors who come from some of the Western centers to ours and they say, I've been in this field for 30 years, all my life. I've never seen the dozen cases that you've just got in clinic over there, right? So that's not a mistake. That's not meant to be read, but the reason it's there, that's 70 disorders that were discovered in Saudi Arabia, genetic, inherited, rare disorders. So when we talk about orphan diseases and rare diseases, if you want to collaborate with somebody, you'd want to come our way, visit Riyadh next year, for example. Okay, so now for some more sobering reality. So cancer. So it's cancer projection in MENA and Saudi Arabia. So this was a study actually conducted by The Economist, looking at the future of cancer care and health system sustainability in the MENA region. So the growth of expected cancer incidence and mortality is phenomenal in this part of the world. So the number of newly diagnosed cancers and deaths is expected to double by 2040. And that's the estimated number in thousands of new cases of cancer between 2020 to 2040. So a 116% increase. And in terms of deaths, you're talking 152%. So that is phenomenal. So that means we have our work cut out for us over the next few years. And, a lot of the focus of what happens in the industry and in everything in the world is obviously focused on the West. But the reality is, if we talk about cancer deaths, for example, if we talk about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, most of it doesn't happen in the US or North America or Europe. It actually happens in Asia, right? So 42% of new cases of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma happen there. But that's not where the trials happen, and that's not where the drug launches happen, and that's not where the CAR T-cell therapies are launched. And deaths, more sobering, 50% of deaths will happen in Asia. So what can we do about that? So bringing that together. So we've talked about the growth in cancer incidence, the high prevalence of genetic disorders, the national biotechnology strategy. And if along with that you have healthcare institutions of excellence. So for example, that map up there, spoiler. Right, that map up there is actually courtesy of Novartis. Sorry, I haven't put the credit there, but that's Novartis's heat map of where they have a CAR T-cell program. That was from 2021. So you have North America, you have Europe, Australia, Japan, but you had Saudi Arabia. So we were one of the first countries outside the traditional areas to launch a commercial CAR T-cell program with Novartis, with KAIMRC, the first child being treated in December 2020. And since then, we have now 5 centers, 2, 3, 4, probably a 5th center coming up, treating patients with commercial CAR T programs with Tisagen or Axicell. And actually the myeloma product was actually Saudi FDA approved 2 years ago now but hasn't launched. So usually it's the other way around, right? So that, they're all ready and then they get the approval. In this case, actually the Saudi FDA has approved Carvykti for myeloma, but we're just waiting for the company to sort out their act and roll it out. So we've had more than 200 patients treated with CAR T-cell therapy. That's more than some of the European countries. In-house production platforms exist at King Faisal on the Prodigy platform, and we've got some excellent scientists who joined us from UCL and from France. We are the largest center reporting to CIBMTR for allogeneic transplants in sickle cell disease. We got a letter that says, you are the largest center transplanting allogeneic sickle cell patients. And we are the largest center transplanting patients with inherited bone marrow failure. So cue the Fanconi anemia patients that I showed up earlier on. And gene therapy for sickle cell disease launched in our sister institute down the road, and expected we have the clinical trial open. And beyond cell and gene therapy, some of it's chopped off over there, but we are making inroads, and hopefully we're punching above our weight. So I don't know if you saw the news, but our institution performed the world's first robotic heart transplant. That was last month. And then last week, they conducted the first robotic implantation of a cardiac pump device. And so everyone's flocking to our institution to learn how that's done. So when all of this happens, you have an opportunity for development of cell and gene therapies, opportunities for academia, opportunities for research, opportunities for collaboration, opportunities for industry, but most importantly, opportunities for our patients. Just a bit about clinical trials. So there is a disparity in where patients are and where clinical trials are or aren't happening. So, for example, sickle cell disease is most prevalent in our parts of the world, but that's not where the clinical trials are happening. So we need to bridge that gap. We need to get clinical trials to where the patients are. For example, in our institution, we have sort of fast-tracked that. So we're able to turn around a package within 8 weeks. And facilitate site activation. And, that's what companies are looking for. That's what industry is looking for. And that's the growth in clinical trials in our institution in just since 2019. So we've gone up from 6 trials in 2019 to 118. So you can do the maths for that. So, God, I'm terrible at maths. So the growth for clinical trials in our institution, in other institutions, and, we have our colleagues down the road in KAIMRC, for example, they churn out phase 3 studies in ICU and the MERS vaccine, for example. We contributed about 10% of patients to the hemophilia B gene therapy trial that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. And this was actually something we had set up in about 3 or 4 months. We just thought it needs to be done, so we did it. And this was done last year. So we had all of these companies presenting, and then we had calls from Boston and California saying, look, can we come, because we've got this really novel gene therapy, but we don't have any patients. So can we come and present our data to you? We said, look, we're full now. We thought it would be a 1-day event, and it became a 2-day event. And we had 60 people coming, and hopefully we'll have a better event, bigger event next year. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. Sorry for going over a bit. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to facilitate. Thanks especially to Simon Meller for facilitating this.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Khaled Alanazi. I come from Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources. We oversee the manufacturing operations in Saudi Arabia. My background in the bioprocess engineering, I actually graduated from Montana, so from United States, which is a very cold state comparable to Texas. So we'll try to give an overlook of So we'll try to give an overlook of our understanding of the manufacturing landscape in the world, as well as to shed the light on some of the opportunities that we witness from our perspective. So looking at the world of the map of the biopharma presence, biopharma manufacturing presence, we noticed that about 37% in the United States and Canada. We noticed that another chunk of the manufacturing, about 26% in Europe, and the other are just split among the world. But if you pay closer attention, there's an absence of a presence of biomanufacturing establishment within the Saudi Arabia and the MENA region. What does that mean? we've observed a few phenomena in the world where some countries have positioned themselves to be strategic export hubs to other regions of the world. An example is Ireland. So Ireland, for their biopharma export, 44 billion, and they're more concentrated and focused to play that export hub toward Europe. Similar phenomena is being observed with Singapore. If you notice, Saudi Arabia is well positioned to play that role for the strategic positioning within the MENA region. Saudi Arabia is 1/3 of the MENA region market size from a pharmaceutical point of view. And let's not forget the geopolitical stability and the positioning of Saudi Arabia with the rest of the Islamic countries. So we paid closer attention to the rest of Islamic organization countries' market sizes, and that's valued around $120 billion in terms of market size. So having a presence in Saudi Arabia not only can unlock the potentials of operating Saudi Arabia, but that actually can be a strategic manufacturing hub for other regions of the world. Another closer look to the pharma market. So we've asked ourselves, we need to localize manufacturing, where to look, what to localize. Looking at the pharma market size, it's valued around 1.5 trillion, and then it's expected to go to 2.3, 2.4 trillion by 2030. Segmentations-wise, small molecules are dominating the most, biologics next, and cell and gene therapy. However, the growth of cell and gene therapy is massive. And looking at different sources, different references, you would notice different numbers, but all lead to the one fact: it's growing massively. But historically, small molecules started, large volume, low value, biologics came a little bit in between, and now cell and gene therapy, much higher cost, with lower volume. We're transitioning away from medication that's one size fits all to more sophisticated, tailored, personalized toward certain rare diseases. With a deeper dive to cell and gene therapy, we try to understand what makes that industry goes much higher. 2017, the first CAR-T approval. Between 2017 to 2020, about 4 other medications. Those 4 are expected to go to 35 cell and gene therapies by 2026. Cost of treatment is very expensive now. But however, the the other side of the story, it has a massive cost reduction lifetime per patient. A lot of perceptions that we've received, cell and gene therapy is expensive. It is expensive if you look at it per dose, but if lifetime-wise, it actually can save a lot of cost. Just those few examples: spinal muscular atrophy, very bad impact on patient, 95% mortality rates, 60% shorter life expectancy. With cell and gene therapy, 90% is actually positive impacts when treated with cell and gene therapy. Likewise, sickle cell diseases, which is Saudi Arabia is well a hot land for such therapeutic offerings in that domain. As mentioned by my colleagues, as government, we truly understand the market, we truly understand where we're going, we truly understand the value propositions that are needed to tailor. So currently there are at least 7 initiatives and national strategies and governmental efforts addressing aspects of the biotech, including cell and gene therapy. Unique gene pool, Dr. Syed has mentioned how rare our area of diseases. Actually, we are about 5 times higher in rare genetic diseases. 55% of that are due because of relative marriages, as mentioned by Dr. Syed. And in terms of clinical trials, 60% of the clinical trials in the regions happening in Saudi Arabia for cell and gene therapy. So you have a robust ecosystem. You have a government that is understanding the challenge and the opportunity, and we've proven that we are putting our efforts where our aspiration is going to be. We acknowledge that it's never only about manufacturing. Cell and gene therapy needs a synergetic ecosystem. You need an R&D, you need a university landscape, you need healthcare provider, regulatory bodies, fundings. So it's multiple entities that need to be synergized with each other in order to really push the manufacturing aspects. We acknowledge that. One of the efforts that we have done within Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources, we've created a national level committee only focused on pushing manufacturing forward. That committee, as mentioned also by my colleagues, sometimes when trying to really implement a project, you need regulatory approvals. You need the funding aspect, especially if you are at earlier stages. You need the manufacturing infrastructures, the proper land, the proper facilities for such, and likewise. So the committee that we have, represented by ministerial level, 9 ministers, coming from Ministry of Industry, Public Investment Fund, Minister of Health, regulatory body chair, and then the custodian of the National Biotech Strategy exists within the committee. And the only scope that the government within that committee is focused on is manufacturing, trying to complement the other effort that exists among our other organizations in the government. So to wrap that up, we got a case, very clear. Saudi Arabia is well suitable for such industry. You have a government that is very ambitious, that's very developing, that will get there. And we really believe this is one of the therapies that the whole world need to focus on, especially in the rare disease profile landscape. We hope to see you next year in Saudi Arabia, and thank you very much for your listening.
Very impressive presentations. I speak for myself when I can say much of this is new. It's not all that, I certainly wasn't all that aware of all of this. And you are obviously well-trained, superbly trained, and well-traveled. So you have seen the world. And so the question is, what are the biggest challenges? What are the key constraints for Saudi Arabia to become a major factor here from your respective perspectives? Anybody can take it.
Well, if I may, thank you. This is a great question. And I would say the challenges are not just unique for Saudi Arabia. There are challenges everywhere. And I would say probably the most challenging is to get Saudi Arabia on the map of biotech. So to be spotted as a capable country. And I think once the ball is rolling, you will see this industry evolving. We started already with some initiatives and some collaboration, partnership. We have seen some of the big industries, they are not aware of the capabilities in Saudi Arabia. And that's one of the goals of, again, this visit and trying to promote Saudi Arabia to the industry.
Anybody else?
As mentioned by Dr. Ahmed, I believe, again, one of the challenges is really to keep up with the demand that we're having. By the end of the day, clinicians in the hospital, they see those rare genetic diseases, and to really ramp up the proper infrastructure to accommodate for such rapid industry from development point of view, from the fact that we have the relative marriages and the other genetic aspects. So I believe really that is one of the challenges that we wake up and sleep on every day. How can we keep up? Cell and gene therapy, I mean, since it's an emerging industry, that gives us a chance to really ride the wave as everyone else in the game. But it's truly keeping up with the demand of the cases that we see and empowering that with the needed infrastructure, in my opinion, is one of the things we face from an industrial point of view.
So I'll introduce myself because I wasn't one of the speakers. My name is Ahmed Alaskar. I'm yet another physician. I'm the director of the stem cell program at Johns Hopkins Aramco Healthcare. So for a change, I'm in Saudi Arabia, but in the right coast. I'm in the eastern province. All the rest are in the capital city, Riyadh, my colleagues, speakers. I will add, we, just like the rest of the world, we have challenges within the healthcare system. So access to these products and cell and gene products, we have access from within the healthcare system. And over the last 2 to 3 years, we tried to analyze and find the areas where we can improve within the healthcare system so patients can receive access timely. Of course, there are approvals and payments that has to be paid, etc. And these are challenges within the system. Now, within the regulatory domain, our Saudi FDA has also went through a learning process, and it's now, I believe, it was ranked as very capable in handling this. I forgot what's the ranking.
Maturity level 4.
Yeah. So there is a maturity level that I believe the WHO is over.
So Saudi was ranked maturity level 4. It's it's the first one in the region. I think 4th or 5th in the world. So it's very advanced ranking that allows them to be benchmarked against well-known regulatory bodies, EMAs and USFDAs.
Yeah. And the third challenge, of course, because we are a 30 million population country with lots of talent. Many of the people who are working within the healthcare system or within the academia are very well trained, and in many ways, in most of the universities, they were really trained in some of the top-notch academic places, and that creates a pool of talent that's available within the country. Nevertheless, we still don't know each other. So we're trying to build this capability within the country to know who's doing what, and try and connect each other so there can be some synergy. Finally, I know that from, again, and now I'm talking from the perspective of the investors. So I sit in the boards of several companies, 2 of the pharmaceutical companies in Saudi Arabia, and it's sometimes not easy to get the investors to come to this domain within the country. So we need to do lots of discussion with the investors so they will be willing to invest in this field. You know, they're always very agnostic to the cell and gene area. And in trying to sell this idea, we try to increase their awareness of 2 facts. One fact is that we have diseases that are unique to our area and to the MENA region, to the rest of the Asian population. And these are diseases that if the prevalence is 1 in a million in the rest of the world, the prevalence is probably 10 times in our area. For instance, there is a condition called osteopetrosis with renal tubular acidosis. It affects the bones primarily. It's heterozygous. And any pediatrician who's working in bone diseases get astonished of the number of these cases that we witness and see in Saudi Arabia. And nowhere else will be willing to spend money or invest in research in that area. So we try and reach out to our investors about the existence of these diseases. And the second fact, we also try to appeal to their goodwill in Fist 4 is to the diseases where we share the burden with the rest of the world. And in these diseases, either we have a different natural history or we have different mutations. And again, this creates an area of interest for them.
Osman, yeah, so if I'm maybe add points, thank you. Just speak. Hello. Okay. Yeah. So, what are the challenges? So there are certainly challenges internally, but there's some external challenges. So the internal challenges, again, as Professor Ahmed said, are universal challenges. So I guess talent, especially the highly specialized talent that's required to, whether it's for the upstream R&D pipelines, or whether it's for process validation, or whether it's for quality and QA, QC, for all of these things in the manufacturing sphere. So that is going to be a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody. And that needs some sort of considered efforts at the academic levels, and we're hoping to get people together to address that. I would say some one of the external challenges we have is maybe with our potential collaborators in the rest of the world. And if we go back to, I might be based some chemistry, because you used to learn about these reactions and how they happen, right? That you got this activation energy that has to be put in, and then when the reaction happens, you get all this energy coming out, or something like that. I saw my son doing his chemistry, and I brought back some memories. And I think there are opportunities there are, as we said, there are opportunities for our potential collaborators in Europe, North America, Far East, China, all over the world. So, but to get to those opportunities, we need to overcome. We need to overcome that barrier to get to that value. And so that activation energy, there's always a risk. And some of our partners have taken that risk and have thought, well, that was a good idea. Why didn't we do that earlier? Right? And so how can we overcome that challenge? And I think understanding each other and building trusting relationships is really important. And just communicating, I think that's really important. So, that happened when Novartis came with the first, it was a risk. We said, oh, you're not going to go there because you always have your first phase. But somebody said, and there was one person who said, no, we can trust these people. They can do it. They can deliver. And it worked. And there was another company, who I won't name, who we were negotiating with for 5 years in the CAR-T space to say, look, Novartis here, why aren't you coming? Oh, we're coming. It's going to take some time. So they came about 3 years later. They're doing really well. And better than expected. And better than their first wave of countries that they usually launch in. Because it's the wave, right? It starts in North America, and the wave spreads across Europe, and then it goes to whoever gets the access. So we were late in that wave of access. So eventually he came to us and we said, look, how are we doing in terms of what you wanted in terms of your opportunities? So you're doing really well, better than some of the European countries. Why didn't you come to us earlier? I was like, you know what? We don't know. Well, you lost an opportunity. And our patients lost out on a good therapy. So there are opportunities. And there's always going to be a risk. But I think with the communication, with understanding what we're doing and where we're heading, and there's something in it for everybody, that challenge can be surmounted.
Thank you very much. I was just thinking that nothing succeeds like success, right? So can we identify some success stories that become an example of what has been done so that it would attract other companies' interests? Are there such things that are distinctive?
Well, I could think of vaccine development against MERS-CoV when it was endemic in Saudi Arabia, probably 2015, where we worked with Oxford University to develop the vaccine, and one of our scientists went there and worked with Sarah Gilbert's lab and developed the vaccine and brought to Saudi Arabia for phase 1. And phase 1 was conducted in our center, and was also it went through a phase of development with the camel testing, and that was a successful story, I remember. And there are many, similar stories. We're currently giving gene therapy to sickle cell and thalassemia patients in the country. So those stories, I'm sure the others would probably.
Yeah, if you allow me, Dr. Ahmed. So one of the recent, I think, successful stories, and it's a very good question, George, by the way. So Saudi Arabia is considered one of the highest countries with diabetic patients. Near 30% of our populations are diabetics. So insulin manufacturing and localization was a rational thing to do. However, in order to push that forward, list of incentives need to be coupled by the government, and list of, I would say, the government needed to back that proposal up. Recently, we've signed with Pfizer and Novo Nordisk and Sanofi, and that deal actually was mediated with local partners. The government backed that up. The deal was about $1 billion deal to secure the insulin procurement for governmental-based hospitals, which makes the majority of procurements for the next I could be wrong, but it was for the next 7 years with intention. So to localize the insulin manufacturing. So if you look at that from a bigger scope, we de-risk those investments for people to come. So again, the message here is that the government, I think we have leaders in the government who are rational, who listens. If the case makes sense, then we'll definitely back up the case. We'll see how we can push it forward. I think we are very good at reaching grounds that makes a success for the government and for the players in the ecosystem.
Thank you very much. I was just thinking, because of the unique genetic composition and certain incidences, are there certain areas where it would be more effective to conduct research in Saudi Arabia on certain patients, maybe develop products given the incidence, which can then be exported to the rest of the world where there's lesser incidence, but we have the incidence, so patient recruitment becomes somewhat easier.
I think, so obviously sickle cell sickle cell disease would be a prime candidate. And that's one of the other issues is what's important, especially with the concerns that we're seeing recently, whether it's with, I guess it's with the initial studies with Bluebird Bio and the concerns of insertional mutagenesis and what have you. If you think, for example, about where the largest cohorts of patients will be for sickle cell disease, right? Middle East, India, and then that can get access to these sorts of therapies. But then in the back of your mind, for example, I see a lot of patients. I run a clinic for familial myeloid disorders. So we have a lot of patients who have familial leukemias. So when we think of the risk of gene therapy and then the risk of, perhaps adverse outcomes, it worries us at the backs of our minds, maybe more than somebody sitting in Boston or in New York, because we have a different cohort of patients. So what's really important is that the early studies, if this is where your market is going to be, if this is where the largest number of your patients are going to be coming from, then you involve that team in the early development and hypothesis testing and, looking at the genomics and getting representation in clinical trials for that therapy. Because it doesn't make much sense if you're doing all of your studies. So, for example, we had colleagues from China, sickle cell disease. They came up with a gene therapy, but they say, hey, guess what? We don't have any patients with sickle cell disease. Can we now run the trial here after it's ready to go? So certain diseases, sickle cell disease, Fanconi anemia. So we had discussions with Rocket Pharma, for example, to say that, look, and the other thing is this, that you will come to certain centers, and it's almost a no-brainer for certain companies because you can come to one center and you can recruit many patients. They're younger, they're less comorbid, because the median age is a lot lower. So I would think hemoglobinopathies, primary immune deficiencies, the metabolic metabolic disorders, those are the sorts of diseases where really we should be talking a lot more. People, in startups or companies, and we have had some who are now running trials there.
And I'll add to that, lots of the pediatric inherited diseases could be added to the list. For instance, there is a condition we hematologists see sometimes, the osteopetrosis and X-linked hypophosphatemia and the inherited hyperlipidemia, the monogenic obesity diseases. In each of these diseases, multiple FAR centers have more than 200 cases in one registry in one center. And the uniqueness also adds to the genetic mutations that cause this disease. And then designing the therapy can be mutation agnostic or can be mutation specific depending on the situation. Another area that's very prevalent is also autoimmune conditions. So diseases like SLE, antiphospholipid syndrome is a big problem. Probably the incidence of these diseases is slightly higher than in other nations, probably related to a mild phenotype of immune dysregulation that is also inherited that leads to the higher prevalence of the autoimmune conditions.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn it over and please ask your questions. I'm as curious about what's on your mind. There's a lot of things on my mind, but I wanted to give you an opportunity.
Hi, I'm Jane Andrews. I run an international consulting firm, and last year I was approached from someone from Dubai who was interested in setting up a center for looking at MSCs and use in populations in Dubai. And I became aware at that time that the demographics was very different in Dubai, many more younger people. And so the market pull from that perspective would be very different than a lot of the rest of the world where we have an aging population. Could you speak to the demographics in your area and the prevalence of specific diseases, and if anyone's done any demographic studies in your area?
Sure. So you're right. The population in general is much younger. So the 50% of the population in Saudi Arabia, for instance, is younger than 30. So this is really, and 1/3 of the population is even younger than 20, if I remember. Now, this demographic is changing. But because of that, the incidence of cancer, the total number of cancers reported per year is much less than any other country. But if you look at the age standardized rate, if you could control it for the age group, you find that the age standardized probably is similar. So the total number of cancers in a nation like Saudi Arabia with 30 million population, total number of cancers reported per year is around 20,000. If you compare this to Canada, for instance, which is 30 million population as well, but because of the age changes, probably their cancer incidence, the annual cancer incidence is much, much higher, probably 3 or 4 times what is reported in Saudi Arabia. Now, going back to your question, what are the diseases that are prevalent at the moment? This should be coupled with, and what are the diseases that we expect to see down the road in 10 years? The slide that my colleague Dr. Osman showed earlier with the increment expected in the MENA region in the cancer incidence, for instance, is because of this demographic. Because of the prevalence of obesity, the lifestyle, the prevalence of diabetes, this will lead to much higher cancer incidence. I don't have a data at the moment to say what are the most prevalent inherited conditions. But MSCs as a technology have application in lots of acquired diseases. And it's more in the field of acquired condition rather than the inherited conditions. So I would focus on the main uses for MSCs and what's the research is evolving in MSCs and make this as your guide to where and how it should be applied. If your question is what is the best investment of the effort of the scientist in the inherited conditions, I would say it's going to be in sickle cell disease and in some of the inherited diseases that affect the younger population and affect also an acquired condition, the larger population. For instance, familial hyperlipidemia. We know that familial hyperlipidemia is very prevalent in Saudi Arabia. We know from the we have a national screening program for hyperlipidemia, and the program starts. If you allow me, it's a good story actually to share. The program starts with the cases of acute MI, acute coronary syndrome, at young people younger than 45, or at people who have no risk factors, not diabetic, not smokers, did nothing sinful in their life, and they get acute coronary syndrome. And the national program identify these cases and then screen the family. And guess what? We've identified tons of people who have familial hyperlipidemia, and we've identified some people who we don't know what's the mutation. They need to go through another step of genetic screening, and that's also a very tedious step that the program doesn't cover. It's a public population-based program and doesn't cover the genetic discovery yet. So if we establish a platform for the familial hyperlipidemia of the inherited condition, for instance, King Faisal, they have a registry for younger than 10 years of age, and they have more than 200 cases in that registry. A platform of that will have also an impact on the general population. I hope I answered your question. Sorry for the lengthy answer.
Simon, you have a question? Excuse me.
Go on, you go first.
Sure.
Yeah, go for it. You seem very excited.
Assalamu alaikum. And thank you for, my name is Omkar Kavlekar. I lead a next-gen therapies consulting practice at Deloitte. And the Middle East is very close and near and dear to me because I spent 15, 20 years of my life in the Middle East. So we talked a lot about the potential target patient population that could benefit from such life-saving therapies and curative therapies. I would love to hear your comments on what is the Saudi Arabia as well as the Middle East region doing in terms of getting ready with capabilities to produce these either in-house or close shore. So I'm talking about manufacturing facilities, supply chain capabilities, talent, the specialized skill set that is required to handle and bring these therapies to patients. I would love to hear your comments on that.
Thank you very much for your question, and we really hope to see you soon also back in Saudi next year. So multiple initiatives are being in place to really develop, I would say, the building blocks to enable manufacturing. So I'll give you a few examples. A couple of years ago, a national industrial strategy that was announced by the Minister of Industry and has prioritized pharma and biopharma manufacturing among the top strategic industries that we need to localize. Subsidiary of that, number of initiatives were produced. I'll just name only a few examples. So in terms of building manufacturing capabilities, it's very expensive operations and expensive infrastructure. So one of the initiatives that has been announced by His Excellency was a program called RAFID program. RAFID program basically has an intention to establish many manufacturing sites among research institutions or universities, where the ministry will provide up to 20 million riyal, that's like $3 to $4 million loan to kickstart the operations with no guaranteed required. And that goes for a startup-based orientations. So in terms of talent development, there are programs among Ministry of Industry where if you've developed your own factory or you've defined the project that you will implement in Saudi Arabia, we can work on a proposal where we mention that we need X number of talent to be trained on XYZ skill set for my operations. So definitely we've done it proactively, we've done it reactively for similar industries, but we definitely acknowledge the need to really kickstart the manufacturing operations. And then the other discussions can come. Is it going to be R&D stage manufacturing versus commercial manufacturings? But by the end of the day, we truly believe that there are a number of incentives that exist in the government where you can utilize for your own purpose whenever a very clear implementation plan and the project that is in place.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for making the trip out to Dallas. I was the Chief Commercial Officer at Avexis Novartis Gene Therapies, and I'm glad to hear that on the CAR-T side, they were able to elevate their game and meet your expectations. Two questions. One is, how are you thinking about the timelines of your FDA and the compression of actually making sure patients, families around the country, not only in Riyadh, but around, are able to then access? So I'm talking about from approval to the time to coverage, number one. And number two, I would just be very curious around the evolution you're seeing in this space of patients now actually having access to care for advanced therapies within the country rather than traveling outside of the country. So it's clearly you guys are leaning in, putting the right capabilities on that second question. I'm just curious how that patient evolution has changed over time. So grateful for your response on that.
Sure. Well, thank you. I don't know if you're talking about clinical trial registration or a medication registration.
I'm talking specifically once the FDA gives its go-ahead.
Yeah.
How do patients, what is the time you're seeing that patients then actually legitimately have access and uptake in Saudi Arabia?
Sure. I mean, in terms of a new therapeutic registration, now the Saudi FDA now is, and for clinical trial as well, they're focusing on the timeline, and there is actually, it's one of the KPIs now that among these initiatives, the time of approval for new therapeutics and medications. So that's for new drugs. Usually, I would say 4 months for new medications registration or less. For clinical trials, 4 weeks to 8 weeks approval timeline for the Saudi FDA. In terms of the access and availability of medications, I mean, there are multiple centers and new centers as well in remote areas that being initiated. And so the access generally is easy for the patients. The government, has put a wide range insurance for the population. So the access should be easy and should be quick in general. One of the recent cell therapy medications, actually Saudi FDA has approved it even before the other US FDA approval. So they're, in general, the process is improving, and that's one of the KPIs for the country as well.
If I can add to that,
Yes.
Syed. So after the FDA approval, there has to be a budget to get the medication, so access to the therapy. And the health, there are two systems, like many countries. We have the private people covered by private insurance, and we have also the health benefit package for the public insurance. And the health benefit package for the public insurance covers all the government employees and all Saudi citizens. And that covers any therapy that is approved by the Saudi FDA for the specific medication. And for some therapies, there are centers that need to be approved for the therapies, like the CAR T cell and the gene therapy. So it's not in any hospital. These patients need to be referred to these specific centers that have the access to this medication and licensed to provide these medications. That's the complementary part.
So you asked about the clinical trials per se, right? So in terms of, in our center, we're very keen to increase our clinical trial portfolio. Perhaps we're fortunate to have our Deputy Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Swag, over here, who's also very keen that we increase our clinical trial numbers of patients. So internally, for that reason, we will turn around a package, internally IRB approved within 4 weeks, and then submit that. So from the first time that we get a package from a sponsor for a trial, we will get internal approval within 4 weeks. And then you could do a parallel submission to the regulatory authority. So in theory, 8 weeks is our timeline, because the Saudi FDA within 4 weeks can approve a drug. Now, what happens sometimes is, that's if all goes well, because sometimes a sponsor, and we've had situations where a sponsor has provided everything that the FDA requires and it goes really well, but sometimes the SFDA has certain requirements and the sponsor hasn't submitted those. So there is a delay, and that happened with, say, a trial for one of the fast CAR T-charge platforms. So that having said, so once the approval happens, then it's up to once the SFDA approval happens, then it's down to the company or the sponsor how quickly they will do the site visit, the site initiation, and allow first patient, first visit. So it is quite variable, but internally, in whatever it is within our capability to do, we will try to expedite. So 4 weeks is what we quote in terms of an internal clearance, and 8 weeks once we have SFD. For access for patients, that's important. So, for example, we try to provide housing and accommodation for patients close by.
Hi.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm Syed Ahmed from Alpida Therapeutics. We're a clinical stage company working in the rare pediatric neurological space, developing genetic therapies for approval. I have a question. First of all, thank you for coming and sharing the biotech landscape in Saudi Arabia. I have a question regarding what financial incentives that, if there are any, that government-led financial incentives that Saudi Arabia has for companies to develop rare and ultra-rare treatments. So, for example, here the FDA has instituted the accelerated approval pathways and the priority review voucher, for example, to encourage companies to develop therapies in that space. And in the EMA, for example, there's the prime status where you have access to regulatory, agencies as well as, tax benefits, etc. Are there any government-led financial incentives to getting genetic therapies in Saudi Arabia?
Thank you for your question. So I'll try to be very, I'll try to lay out the financial incentives according to the value chain. Okay. So R&D incentives and financial incentives within the R&D stage, there's an authority that has been established recently and announced by His Royal Highness called the Research and Research Development Innovation Authority. They're basically, they fund research in the basic research stage. Post that, there's a new entity that has been established called the Saudi NIH. So Saudi National Institute of Health, and they are more focused on funding translational research and clinical trial stages. Post that, once you get to the manufacturing aspects, there are financial incentives even for that. So an example to that is the Saudi Industrial Development Fund, which can fund up to 75% of your project budget if you want to build a factory. I would say those are, at least what I can think of right now, those are the direct financial incentives that you can get. They're competitive. Some of them are very competitive, but they exist. And I think everything that I mentioned is non-diluted equity. So if you are a startup that want to localize in Saudi Arabia, you'll have a chance to compete in those funds.
You've had some SMEs.
Yeah, I could add also some to that. I mean, there are also industrial cities that have been set up where land could be also obtained at a competitive rate and lower rate, actually. In addition, there is, if you reach to the export, there is export package and tax and exemption packages with that as well. There are different sources of loans and financial incentives.
And maybe to add to that, the Ministry of Investment has an initiative, and actually we've kind of been beneficiaries of that kind of collaboration. So if there's a startup or an SME that is interested in partnering or collaborating with academic institutions or organizations within the country, then the Ministry of Investment has a pathway to facilitate. So the SME or the startup has to register in Saudi, register an office there, and choose a partner. So, for example, we're in talks with a startup that has a very promising therapy in the CGT space. They're partnering with us. They're bringing us the phase 2 study. They're doing a tech transfer, and the Ministry of Investment is involved. They've registered an office in the Kingdom, and the Ministry of Investment is helping them do that. So it's a win-win, really.
I'll add another channel also through the universities. So there are 3 universities with startup incubating program. King Saud University in Riyadh. They have King Saud Techno Valley, UPM, University of Petroleum and Minerals in the Eastern Province, where I am. Go Eastern Province. And they have also an excellent Bahrain Techno Valley program. And the third is in Jeddah. King Abdulaziz University, they have Jeddah Techno Valley program, and each one of these have stories and narrations of some startups that they started elsewhere, moved to the Techno Valley within the university. Some of them had a journey without hiccups, other dried out and moved to another area, and etc. The same life cycle of startups that you witness elsewhere, with the hypes and the dramas and whatnot, we witness it with all the 3 universities.
Thank you, everyone, for the fantastic discussion today. I'm Willie Reeves, Head of Public Engagement with Celino. We are a Boston-based personalized cell therapy, specifically iPSC-derived cell therapy biomanufacturing company. And I'd love to understand, how is the Kingdom thinking about what makes an ideal partner? If an international company wants to localize in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, for example, where I'll be returning to in a few weeks, what really makes that company very compelling, especially if they're focusing on expanding patient access and decreasing cost for autologous cell therapies?
Can I? Yeah, okay. So that's a question we wanted somebody to ask, right? Because that's what we want. We want partners. Our partners are the ones who collaborate with us so that our patients get access to therapies. So that's from the patient perspective. But we all have, there's national ambition and institutional ambitions. So our partners are the ones who help us. They see an opportunity, they're ready to take a risk, and that opportunity leads to your success, and it leads to our success, where, centers want to be top-notch centers, top academic centers. We can't be a top academic center if nobody wants to bring us trials. Somebody who's willing to take the risk and bring a trial here, and we have negotiation, relation develop, trust develop, and then we get trials. It works, and then they come back with more trials, and we've awarded those partners. So that's what we're looking for. So when we have others where it's pretty obvious that the only interest is financial, they haven't valued the relationship, they haven't built the trust, they haven't been willing to take a risk. So where that happens, you don't have much of a partnership. And that vendor, that's a vendor, right? That vendor is going to lose out in the long term. Because where you have a partner, you're going to say, well, you stood with us. And where, for example, there's equipoise, where, for example, there's 2 products that are very similar in outcomes, we'll say, well, you're out. We're going to go with that one because, well, you have a choice. So if we can make an institutional choice, we will choose our partner over a vendor.
Thank you very much. I just want to wrap with one question, if I may. Visualize 2030, 5 years from now. Where would you like to see this industry? We'll be a facilitate next year, but 2030, which is the end point of the initial plan here, if you could dream or forecast, what would you like to see?
Can start. I think first of all we will be very busy thinking for 2040. That's the first thing. The second thing, if I want to speak the domain that I come from, I want to localize the full value chain of manufacturing for cell and gene therapy, from the development, having the proper technical infrastructure for R&D, to commercializations, the proper technologies. I visualize this is going to happen, but again, we're very ambitious. That I think whenever we achieve one goal, we're looking for the next one.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I would envision cities of biotech. There is already one under establishment now, but I would imagine there will be more of biotech clusters in Saudi Arabia, similar to what's happening elsewhere. And I would imagine and see products that's coming up that has impact on the health of the patients worldwide and in Saudi and in the economy. And I would add to this as well. I would see the GDP, the non-oil GDP of Saudi Arabia portion has risen to 50% or higher.
Thank you very much. Unless somebody else wants to say something, this has been very informative. It eliminated much of the mystery, and we look forward to collaborating with you and trying to achieve that 2030 goal. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending.